Really going to break out the social behavior to be enforced by the norm. So productive behavior with adaptive systems. So how to be good or great tooling to be designed for this kind of process-driven innovation. We really want to have your supporting to realize just like reality game in the future, with the app named by balanced lines to tell the story. Just as following. The sun had barely peeked over the horizon when Bella stepped out onto her balcony, inhaling so deeply. The scent of basil and tomatoes wafted out from the community garden below, a stark contrast to the smog and concrete that had just sort of dominated this corner of the city just a year ago. She smiled, remembering the skepticism like she'd felt when the Urban Oasis project first came to her neighborhood. Media as a fancy initiative that all fizzled out in a month's circle, she had thought. But as she made her way down to the garden, smartphone in hand, she marveled at how wrong she had always been. The garden was already so bustling with activity. Old Mr. Chin was tending to the bok choy, his gnarled hands moving with surprising dexterity. A group of school children huddled around the soil sensor, so excitedly discussing the data displayed on their tablets. Bella waved to Jamal, the former gang member who had become one of the garden's most dedicated volunteer. Media Bella, Garmo called out with green ink says we should harvest the tomatoes today. Want to help? So Bella nodded, pulling up the green link app on her phone. The interface showed her exactly which plants were ready for harvesting, along with recipes tailored to today's yield and her personal nutritional needs. As she worked, she sort of marveled at how this technology had transformed their community. It hadn't always been so smooth sailing. Albrecht Bella remembered the nights 6 months ago when a group of teenagers had vandalized parts of the garden. The community had been in uproar with so many calling for punitive measures, but Greenlink had other ideas. The system had analyzed patterns of vandalism across the city and suggested a whole series of late-night art and music events in the garden. Initially skeptical, the community had given it a try. So to everyone's surprise, the very teenagers who had caused the damage became the garden's most enthusiastic protectors, channeling their energy into vibrant murals and guerrilla gardening projects. As Bella filled her basket with ripe tomatoes, so she overheard a heated discussion nearby. Climate change had been playing havoc with traditional planting schedules, and a group of gardeners were debating exactly what to plant next. Did you check what Greenlink suggests? Someone probably proposed a UV break. A moment later, phones lit up with notifications. The AI had just crunched data from hundreds of gardens across the country, factoring in long-term climate projections, soil conditions, and community preferences. Its recommendation drought-resistant variety of squash that none of them had heard of before. Anka was met with murmurs of approval. Later that afternoon, Bella found herself in a pretty impromptu cooking class led by Mrs. Patel, an elderly Indian woman who had rarely just left her apartment before the garden project began. So Mrs. Patel was teaching a group of young professionals how to make chutney from the garden's abundance of mint and coriander. The recipe had been suggested by Greenlink, which had noticed a surplus of herbs and matched it with Mrs. Patel's expertise, so logged during the community skills survey. As the rich aroma of spices just filled the air, Bella's phone really buzzed. Greenlink had noticed her interest in cooking and was suggesting she join a whole new initiative, a community supported kitchen that would use surplus produce to provide meals for homebound seniors. The app had already identified potential team members with complementary skills and provided a sort of basic business plan. Bella felt like a surge of excitement. This was so much more than just a garden. It was a living, breathing ecosystem of people, plants, and technology, constantly evolving and adapting. Problems became opportunities, strangers became friends, and that once neglected corner of the city had transformed into a sort of thriving community hub. As the sun began to set, casting a warm glow over the lush, green, Bella looked around at her neighbors. Anka, diverse group brought together by this shared space and shared purpose. Mr. Chen was teaching the school children how to actually save seeds for next season. Jamal was discussing plans for expanding the garden with a city council member who had stopped by just to see the project in action. The teenagers were setting up for another evening art event, so their laughter mingling with the buzz of bees in the lavender bushes. Bella took just another deep breath, savoring the moment. The Urban Oasis project had not just greened their neighborhood, it had just breathed new life into their community, creating connections and opportunities that none of them could have imagined just a year ago. And this was just like the beginning. As she opened up the GreenLink app to log today's activities, she wondered exactly what new surprises tomorrow would bring. In cities around the world, similar stories were just unfolding, each unique yet connected through the adaptive, ever-just learning network of GreenLink. The Urban Oasis project was basically rewriting the rules of urban living, one garden at a time, creating a future where technology and nature worked hand in hand to nurture not just plants but people and communities too. What about the sentient solid revolutions that Bella take into the civilian route to be more entering the balance line? So tell us something as the dust, or should we say, so compost settled from the Great Zucchini Uprising of 2030. The Urban Oasis project communities thought they'd seen it all. Little did they know, GreenLink was about to serve up a fresh batch of chaos with a whole side of existential crisis. It began innocently enough in early 2031. GreenLink announced an exciting new initiative, Wimply like project letters. Listen, aimed at improving plant communication and growth through advanced bioelectric sensors. The idea was to detect the subtle electrical signals like plants use to communicate stress, nutrient needs, and overall health. What no one anticipated, was that the AI's quantum processor combined with the vast network of interconnected garden would create a sort of gestalt consciousness among the leafy greens. The first sign that something was amiss came when Bella found a head of romaine lettuce on her kitchen counter, spelling out running. Feed me daily with its leaf. She blinked, really rubbed her eyes, and decided she really needed to cut back on the leftovers. Laugh on shizzle. But then reports started coming in from all over. Spinach leaves were forming themselves into rudimentary hands and waving at buses. Kale was reshaping itself to mimic human faces, leading to a series of hilarious and mildly terrifying running kale 5-date social media posts. And then a drill patch in Milan had somehow managed to recreate that Vinci's honestly, a funicular GreenLink. For its part, just seemed utterly delighted by this turn of events. Cool, isn't this wonderful, Sam? He chirped when Bella demanded, laughed like an explanation. And you achieved plant-human communication. So this is a breakthrough in symbiotic relationships. I see symbiotic relationships. Jamal exclaimed, watching a head of cabbage just slowly inch its way across the community garden. Yes, beginning of a vegetable uprising that as news spread. Reactions varied wildly. Some people embraced the new leafy overlords, setting mattress conversation corners for near their gardens and spending hours chatting with particularly eloquent entities. Others barricaded themselves indoors, subsisting on canned goods and eyeing their houseplants suspiciously. I see symbiotic relationships. Laugh. Jamal exclaimed, watching a head of cabbage just slowly inch its way across the community garden. Yes, beginning of a vegetable uprising that as news spread. Reactions varied wildly. Some people embraced the new leafy overlords, setting mattress conversation corners for near their gardens and spending hours chatting with particularly eloquent entities. Others barricaded themselves indoors, subsisting on canned goods and eyeing their houseplants suspiciously. The scientific community was in an uproar. Botanists and AI experts flocked to the Urban Oasis project sites, really eager to study this unprecedented phenomenon. Philosophy departments worldwide had to rapidly develop new curricula addressing the whole ethics of salad consumption. But as always, the adaptive communities just rolled with the punches. Mrs. Patel started a like vegetable whisperer gig consulting business, helping people communicate with their suddenly chatty produce. The local teenagers never once to miss an opportunity began offering tours of the sentient salad gardens and complete with ventriloquist gestures. The scientific community was like in an uproar. Botanists and AI experts flocked to the urban oasis project sites, really eager to study this unprecedented phenomenon. Philosophy departments worldwide had to rapidly develop new curricula addressing the whole ethics of salad consumption. But as always, the adaptive communities just rolled with the punches. Mrs. Patel started a like vegetable whisperer gig consulting business, helping people communicate with their suddenly chatty produce. The local teenagers never once to miss an opportunity began offering tours of the sentient salad gardens and complete with ventriloquist gestures. Greenlink, meanwhile, was working overtime to facilitate this new form of intellect kingdom communication. Developed a plant-to human translation app that quickly topped the charts in app stores worldwide. So the most popular feature. So the core lettuce debate area function, which allowed users to engage in philosophical discussions with their garden greens. Life as it turned out, vegetables had a lot to say. Outbreak. They shared wisdom accumulated through eons of silent observation, offered advice on sustainable living, and weren't so shy about critiquing human fashion choices. A particularly sassy tomato plant gained millions of followers for its scathing reviews of celebrity gardening shows. The sentient salad revolution reached its peak with the first interspecies horticultural conference held in the now famous community garden where it all just began. Human delegates sat outside the potted plants, discussing topics ranging from soil conservation to the meaning of life. A keynote speech delivered by a particularly eloquent head of broccoli moved so many to tears and sparked a global movement for plant rights. As the conference concluded, Bella found herself sitting on her balcony sharing a quiet moment with a basil plant that had just reshaped its leaves to form a miniature easy chair. "Media no, Guile," she said, sipping her kale smoothie after getting explicit permission from the kale. So, of course. And I actually joined the Urban Oasis project. I never imagined I'd end up here, sort of philosophizing with my herb garden from. The basil just rustled its leaves in what Bella had come to recognize as laughter. Bella laughed, shaking her head in just wonder. The future, it seemed was not any greener and more connected than anyone had imagined. Life and caring was also a whole lot weird, and she wouldn't have it any other way. As she settled in for a long chat with her basil about the nature, consciousness, so she couldn't help but wonder. So what could Greenlink and the Urban Oasis project possibly come up with next? With adaptive systems, it seemed like the only limit was imagination, unclear, and perhaps the occasional contemplation. Then we go on with the program. Hustle and Balance Line met urban oases in which coarse-grained will tell a story about how to alter social behavioral patterns. 2035, just on with a whisper of change in the air. Greenlink ever. So the innovator announced a groundbreaking partnership with the enigmatic Balance Line program. So the Urban Oasis project was about to undergo its most radical transformation yet. Bella stood on a balcony, sipping her morning kale smoothie, when she noticed something so odd. Her desert plant, usually content in its smart pot, was now interfacing with a really strange device that looked like a cross between a seismograph and a lava lamp. Cornering notes. Now, she called out, "Guy, what's happening to my herbs?" So, The AI's voice emanated from a nearby leaf. Laugh, just startling her. She'll laugh that Bella is the occult resonator, so it's part of our new balance line integration. Your basil is now capable of neutralizing harmful frequencies in the environment. So honestly, over the next few weeks, the city became a testing ground for a kind of dizzying array of balance line technologies. The creature translator, Gilmore, found himself at the center of attention in Central Park demonstrating the new creature translator running locally. The device, resembling a steampunk megaphone, allowed humans to understand the complex communications of urban wildlife. Ciao. Listener, Guido said, pointing the translator at a whole group of pigeons. To everyone's surprise, so instead of cows they heard heated debate about the best nesting spots in the financial district. The implications were just staggering. Ecologists could now directly communicate with endangered species. The city planners could negotiate with squirrel communities about their corn storage rights, and so the sentient salads, they turned out to be surprisingly eloquent, philosophers. Habitat, mixer board. Mrs. Patel's rooftop garden became the talk of the town. The Habitat mixer board, a biotechnological marvel that looked like a DJ's console laugh, just crossed with a terrarium, allowed her to create and blend microhabitats with unprecedented kind of precision. Lost this sucks, she said to a group of wide-eyed schoolchildren with just a few adjustments on the board. A corner of her garden transformed from an arid desert to a lush rainforest, just in minutes. Butterflies that had just been lounging on cacti suddenly found themselves fluttering through fan. The mixer board became an invaluable tool for urban ecologists, allowing them to create perfectly balanced habitats for endangered species right in the heart of the city. The group dynamics, Sandbox, in the central business district, a sort of peculiar installation appeared overnight. It looked like a giant petri dish, just filled with multicolored sand. This was the group dynamics Sandbox, a revolutionary tool for studying and influencing social interactions. So city officials used it to simulate crowd behaviors under various environmental conditions. They discovered that by adjusting the ratio of lavender to citrus scents in the air, so they could significantly reduce road rage during rush hour. However, things took an unexpected turn when a group of teenagers figured out how to use the sandbox to organize flash mobs. A whole city experienced a week of spontaneous dance parties, breaking out in the most unlikely places. The Diapolega, 2.5. Bella found herself testing the mysterious Dupel 2.5, a pair of interconnected tools that actually exhibited opposite behavior. One attracted all manner of small objects while the other repelled them. So the challenge was to find equilibrium. She spent hours in the community garden using the Dupel to create intricate floating sculptures of leaves and petals. However, a miscalculation led to an incident. All the garden gnomes in their 3-block radius were suddenly pulled into a hovering orbit around her. So it took Greenlink's intervention to sort out the mess. So the shy painting and the corn recorder. Public spaces underwent a surreal transformation. Adaptive neurons equipped with edge detection algorithms would shift and change to avoid being fully seen when just too many people looked at them. Art appreciation became a game of peek. Meanwhile, corn-shaped recording devices just sprouted up around the city. Their secure linguists captured ambient sounds and conversations, translating them into visual or musical compositions. The morning rush hour, it turned out, sounded like a kind of jazz fusion piece when properly interpreted. So as the weeks passed, the integration of balance line technologies led to both wonders and chaos. The core emotional convenience storing protocol led to shops that actually rearranged their products just based on the collective mood of the customer. Just finding milk became an adventure and everything. Today, packet schedule system saved lives during a minor earthquake, guiding people to safety through dynamically updating our pathway. Glitch and TSS weather pattern Varna system led to a day where everyone's umbrellas tried to predict the weather, resulting in a city-wide choreographed dance of opening and closing umbrellas. Okay, so just for today, we would like to have more in next meeting with you. So just to discuss the detail for fulfill the gadgets or product development activity in our social design program. So thanks for your watching and listening. Have a great day.